before I jump in with talking about what Andrew asked me to come here and talk, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm not normally here tonight, but I want you to know a little bit about who I am. I'm 34 years old. My name is Ethan. I'm one of the pastors here. But I haven't always been one of the pastors here. When I think my first job, I was 16. No, it wasn't my first job. It was one of my first jobs. I was 16. I delivered pizzas for Pizza Hut. That was one of my favorite jobs because anytime that somebody ordered a pizza and they ended up not actually canceled the order or something, I could just reach over in my car and I could eat that pizza all day long. So that was one of my favorite jobs. After that, I went to college at California Baptist University. It's just over here in Riverside, not too far from here. After I graduated, I went over to UC Riverside. I worked at UC Riverside, and my job there was basically to tell college students about Jesus and to help them follow Jesus. So I really like doing that because in my experience, it's really hard to follow Jesus in college. And as I talk to more college students, it's really hard for them too. There's a lot of challenges. So I really like doing that job as well. And then after that, I worked for a marketing company. And my job for the marketing company was kind of interesting. It was to basically buy ads. So if you Google something like, I need a ride or something like that, and then on the search results, what comes up? Like ads for Uber or Lyft or something like that. And every time you click on one of those ads, then Uber or Lyft, whatever ad you click on, they end up paying like $1 or $2 or $5 or something like that for that click. And so my job was to figure out, write those ads and everything, so when people searched, the ad would pop up, and then decide how much are we going to pay for that ad. So that was kind of interesting too. But this is my favorite job I've ever had, being one of the pastors here at Seabreeze. And I also want to introduce you to my family. I think a lot of you guys know my family. I'm here today with my wife, Andrea. Our 4 kids aren't here, but here's a picture of my wife, Andrea, our 4 kids, and you've probably seen them around a bit, but I did think that probably the best way for me to introduce my family to you today would be to just bring one object that kind of tells you about each one of my kids. So I brought with me one object to represent each one of my kids. So first off is Millie. Millie is 6 years old right now, and she's just learning how to read. And so this is the Boxcar Children. Have any of you guys ever read this book? I see some heads nodding. Yeah, it's a great book. Anyway, she just learned how to read, and she's super pumped about it. And so she's reading everything she can. And look, she dog-eared right here. She's halfway through. This is going to be her first chapter book when she finishes it. So we're pretty pumped about that in our house. This is Clara. Clara is our 5-year-old. And I don't know if you can see what she's holding right there. I'll show you actually what she's holding. I brought it with me. My family recently started doing something new. We got 5 quail, and we're keeping 5 quails in our backyard right now. Actually, we had 5, and 2 of them flew away, so we're down to 3. We have Poof. My son named one of our quail Poof. Mary and I think Barrett are the ones that we have right now. But look at this. Every day we get a little egg. So this is Clara. She's pumped. Every day she goes out and she looks to see if she can get a little quail egg right now. So that's kind of Clara. She's just really into the quail and the eggs right now. And then Richard. This is my son, Richard. I think in this picture, we thought he was playing in mud. Turns out he was playing in a combination of mud and goose poop. So we found that out later. What are you going to do? Just clean them off, I guess. This is it's not really a knife. It's not sharp or anything, but he thinks this is his knife, And so every day he wakes up pumped to come downstairs and cut bananas with his knife. So he uses this knife for everything. It is his knife. He's 3 years old, and this is his hunting knife, I guess. This thing is great. Okay, and then Margaret. Here's Margaret. She's my 2-year-old. Can you see that picture? Isn't she sweet? She in this picture, her face is smushy because it's smushed up against babies, but it's not normally smushy. Okay. I don't have anything against smushy faces, but hers isn't normally smushy. She loves babies. Everything babies right now. So I just brought some of her little babies in a basket. If you talk to Margaret right now, she's all about the baby. He went into a new place and would conquer them. He would take out the smartest and the most talented people. He'd want to bring them back to Babylon. these are sharp guys. These are smart guys that we're talking about in this story. And then something you need to know about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, is that he was just kind of power crazy, right? So he wanted everyone to obey him. He wanted everyone to be afraid of him. He wanted everyone to know, basically, don't mess with me. And so one of the ways that he was kind of flexing his muscles here is by building this giant statue. And then he had these people in Babylon, and it says in the passage they're from all these nations, and he was basically going to force them to bow down and worship this statue. Just kind of one of the many things he did to, show his power and be in charge of his kingdom. And so what he did is he built this massive statue, and it was an impressive statue. And actually, what I did earlier today is I talked to one of the other pastors, tutor here at Seabreeze, and I asked him if he could get the lift. And it's actually, if you look, it's right over there. You see that thing up there? That's 45 feet tall. So see how tall that is? Now, the statue was 90 feet tall. So we can't get that thing up to 90 feet tall, obviously, but that's 45 feet tall. So that's half of how tall this statue was. So isn't that crazy? So imagine that. And it probably wasn't solid gold, but covered in gold. So you would have been able to see this thing for miles and miles and miles around. So it was an impressive statue. And it's not really clear if it was a statue of Nebuchadnezzar. I think like in my children's Bible when I was a kid, it was a picture of a statue of Nebuchadnezzar. It could have been of Nebuchadnezzar himself, or it could have been of one of the false gods that they worshipped in Babylon. But anyway, he's got this massive statue, and what he's saying basically is to these people is you're going to worship who I tell you to worship. You're going to worship who I tell you to worship, and you're going to like it, or at least you're going to pretend to like it. So that's kind of the position that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves in. And then on top of that, Nebuchadnezzar says, if you don't bow down and worship this statue, then I'm going to throw you into this fiery furnace. Okay, and then one thing I've always wondered is, when I read this story, is why was there a furnace there? Like, it seems kind of random that there'd be this fiery furnace. One thing I realized this next time reading it through is that in building the statue, they would have been working with gold and all these other metals. So they would have been using this furnace to melt those metals down so that they could build and shape this statue. And so he's got it there for that purpose, and then I guess that's just a pretty convenient punishment and a pretty convenient threat for manipulating these people. And so everyone's gathered here at the statue, and what they did was there was a sign. And the sign was when the music starts playing, this lists all these instruments in the Bible. When all these instruments start playing, then everyone was supposed to bow down and start worshiping, the statue, twice that height. And so the music starts playing, and then all these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're a part of this crowd. And once the music starts playing, then, man, all the people around them, they hit the deck, and all of a sudden, instead of a crowd of people, you've got all these people bowing down, and you look out, and you see these three guys just standing there. So they were blending in with the crowd. They worshiped God. They didn't want to worship this false statue, but then all of a sudden, everyone else is bowing, and they stick out like a sore thumb. It's very obvious what's going on with them. And so people see this, and they run straight to Nebuchadnezzar. They want to be the tattletales, and they want to tell him what's going on. And then what happens is he just gets mad. He gets furious because he's trying to flex his muscles, and these guys are resisting that and messing with what he's got going on. But he wants to give him a second chance because you got to remember, these are sharp guys. They actually really helped him. They helped him run his kingdom well, and he knew that. So he wants to give him a second chance. And so here's what he says. Even though he's mad, he gives him a second chance. He says, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? If you are ready to fall down and worship the image I've made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? So kind of just picture yourself in that situation. Picture yourself in that situation. Basically, you have two options. One, you can bow down, or you can die. So consider that. What would you do in that situation? And as you're thinking about that, hear the response, hear what these guys actually said. Hear this kind of gutsy response from these three young men. They said, or here's what it says in verse 16 and 17. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you on this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. So, man, that's a lot of courage right there. They're basically saying that we know that God can save us if he chooses to save us. And then they go on to say this, but even if he does not save us, we want you to know your majesty. Now, imagine they're saying this to the most powerful man on the earth, and he holds their life in his hand. They say, we want you to know your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar was mad before this when he gave him the second chance, and now he just kind of flies off into a rage. Now he's just furious. And so what he does is he orders that furnace there to be heated to 7 times its normal temperature. And Jimmy, if you can come up here and help me with our furnace, we'll see if we can get our furnace going. Thanks, man. I don't know what's going to happen with this furnace. We're going to give it a shot, okay? So Jimmy's going to light that for us. So he has the furnace heated to 7 times its normal rate. And that probably doesn't mean like exactly 7 times. Like if it was 1,000, then heat it up to 7,000. What it probably means is just get this thing as hot as you possibly can. So he's mad, he's hot, he wants that furnace to be as hot as he can get it as well. How's it going over there? It's coming together. All right, we'll see how this goes. So what they would have done to actually heat that up is they would have used bellows. They would have used these massive bellows. And Jim, if you can stay right there and help me with something. So I don't have massive bellows. I wasn't able to bring massive bellows. But I did bring small bellows. Look at these. Jimmy, can you help me with this? I'm gonna give these to you. You know how to work bellows, right? Let's see how it works. So the idea is that these guys, and then we'll put the grate on it when we're done with that. Yeah, just go ahead. See if give it some muscle. It's a windy day. This guy's getting all the air it needs right now. But basically the idea with the bellows is it pushes all the air in there. Will you put the grate on it now, Jimmy? Thanks. It pushes all the air that's needed to make it hotter and make it as hot as possible. So if it gets a little bit of air, you're going to have a warmer, a less intense blaze. And so he gets all these bellows in full swing. So this fire is just about as hot as it could possibly be. In fact, it gets so hot that when he tells his soldiers to go and take these guys and throw them into the furnace, somehow in the process of throwing them in, it's so hot that it kills them there on the spot. So it's blazing hot, and he tosses them in. And so it actually says that what he did was toss them in, and it specifically mentions that they were wearing all of their clothes. So they're wearing their robe and all their normal clothes, and he tosses them into the fire. And this is kind of a puny fire, right? It's not much. It's not much to look at. But then when they're in the fire, he tosses them in, and he looks and he sees something he doesn't expect to see. He sees, one, they're standing in the fire. So the guards who have put them in, they're down dead on the ground. But these 3 guys are standing in the fire. But then something even more surprising is that there's no longer 3 guys in there. He says, hey, wait guys, didn't we just put in 3 people? Why do I see 4 people in this fire? And then he also sees that one of them, the 4th guy, looks like, it says, like an angel of God or like a son of God. And so he says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out of there. And so it says that they come out of the fire. And then it says when they come out, not a single hair on their head is singed. Their clothes don't even stink. I mean, if you guys want to come up and smell this thing right now, it spent just a few seconds in our pretty puny, don't actually come up, sorry. You can smell it afterward. Yeah, when you spend a little bit of time in even a puny fire, your clothes are singed, you smell like smoke. I probably smell like smoke just from standing next to it right now. But it says none of that was on them. They didn't smell of smoke, nothing like that. And so Nebuchadnezzar, man, he sees that, and he realizes that he's dealing with a different kind of God than the false god that he set up. He realizes that he's dealing with a real God, with a true God. And here's what he says. He says, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted him and defied the king's command, and they were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." Man, isn't that cool? I think that's pretty cool. What a testimony to God, and what an amazing thing that they got to see God do in their lives. And King Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, he rules the world, and now he's worshiping God and giving credit to God. But none of this would have happened if they hadn't said what they said. This happened because they said, "But even if God does not," that is, even if God does not deliver us, even if God does not deliver us, "we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." Rather than live lives that were kind of close-fisted to God and say, "God, we're going to obey you. We're going to obey you, but we're only going to obey you as long as things work out for us. We're going to obey you, but only as long as we get to keep our life." Rather than do that, they actually didn't hold their lives closely in their fist. They opened up their hands to God, and they said, "God, we will obey you no matter what. We're going to obey you. We want to keep our lives, but even if we don't, we still want to follow you." And so for me, just a quick takeaway for me, guys, from this story is that personally, I often find that, man, I don't want to do what they did. I don't want to obey God, or I do want to obey God, but I want to put limits on that, right? So I want to obey God. I want to have my hands open to him, but not if that means doing something that's going to make me look stupid. Or I want to obey God, but man, not if that means going up to someone that I need to ask forgiveness for and asking for forgiveness for something I did. I don't want to obey him in that way. I've got my limits. Yeah, I want to obey God, but not if it means saying no to something because I know that thing would dishonor him, or maybe that there's something else that he wants me to do instead of that fun thing. It's like I want to obey him, but not if it means that I've got to say yes to something that might be really hard. And so I'm just being totally honest with you guys. Like that's how it is for me when I think about the things that God asks me to do. There's so many things where, man, I really want to obey God, but I also want to kind of draw a line and draw limits to that, unlike what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. But in their case, they were willing to obey God no matter what, and they actually got to keep their lives. They got to obey God and keep their lives, which is great. There's someone else in the Bible, though, who held his life out to God kind of with the same attitude and didn't get to keep his life. And, the night before Jesus was arrested and crucified, he prayed something like this. Well, he prayed this. He said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." And by that he meant he knew what was going to happen. He knew that he was going to be crucified, and he didn't want that. Who would want that? He said, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me." But then he said, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." So he didn't want to suffer and die. He asked for a different way, but unlike Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with Jesus, man, he didn't get a way out. Actually, within hours of praying what he prayed, he was arrested, and he was suffering, and he died. But even in that situation where Jesus put his hands out and said, "God, your will be done," and it looks like, man, the worst case scenario happened, man, look at how God used that. God used that to save each and every one of us because of his willingness to obey God without any limits. Then God used that to offer forgiveness to each one of us who is willing to accept that forgiveness. And so when we open up our hands to God and we decide to obey him, no matter what, without limits, we actually don't know what God's going to do. Maybe we get the thing that we're like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We get to keep our life. We actually get the thing that we wanted. Or maybe it's like Jesus and we don't get the thing that we wanted. But we do know that no matter what, when we open up our hands to God and obey him without limits, then he's always going to use that for good. He's a good God, and we can trust him. So thank you guys so much for letting me share this story. It was a lot of fun to be here with you guys. Andrew, do you want me to pray or anything? All right, I'll pray. God, I just ask that you would bless this group of young men and women. And God, I pray that that you would just help us to be people who say yes to you, not with limits on that, and that you would search our hearts and you'd show us where we have put limits on our obedience to you. And God, we thank you so much that Jesus didn't do that. We thank you that Jesus gave himself up for us, and we thank you for that in his name. Amen. Thanks, guys.